Hey guys, it's Matt here, and in this video, we'll be going over how the iPhone 5 holds up in 2022. Is a 10-year-old phone still usable? Let's find out. The UI of this phone still looks really good with iOS 10. You can see the control center still has the two-page design that I honestly still like. I don't like it better than iOS 11 and later's control center, but I think it looks pretty good. This version actually still had a notification shade that they got rid of in later versions. Now you can see here, the lock screen actually looks pretty darn modern. It's a little dim on this camera, but you can see it looks pretty darn modern compared to modern iPhones. In fact, this still looks roughly the same as it does on an iPhone that we'd see today. Now iOS 16 is planning to change that, but iOS 10 was actually the first version to introduce this style with the press home to unlock. Now the passcode lock screen didn't change from iOS 9's. iOS 11 was the first version to actually change that. It was the first version where you could swipe over to see your camera, and also the first version where you could actually swipe to see your widgets. iOS 10 was also the last version to have names on the bottom bar here on the dock. And finally, one of the biggest things, and it has nothing to do with the iOS version itself, iOS 10 was the last version of iOS that actually ran on iPhones with a 32-bit chip, being the A6 chip. So this phone is actually a 32-bit iPhone, but you probably wouldn't think it with how well it runs. I mean, genuinely, iOS 10 on this iPhone is really nice to use, and I rarely have any problems with it. So, I've got my iPhone 5 right here, and we're going to be doing some tests with it. Now, I figured that if I just showed it on camera, that'd be a bit of a pain, so I'm going to take advantage of a feature that this device has, which is the Lightning port, which this iPhone introduced and we still have, and I'm going to use screen capture software. So you can see here's the home screen of this device, and you probably also noticed that there's a lot of apps that I actually removed, like the Stocks app I uninstalled, and that's because iOS 10 was the first version that actually let you uninstall apps. Now iOS 10 was a little different. iOS 11 was the first OS that allowed you to fully delete apps. iOS 10 just hid them from what I remember, but iOS 11 actually let you delete them. Now the iPhone 5 was also the first iPhone that actually had the Apple Watch app. I uninstalled it because I can't pair an Apple Watch to this thing because you need to have a watch running watchOS 3. Now if we go into let's just go and view some of the apps before we do any kind of speed tests. Let's view some of the apps and see how they look. So if I open up the Wallet app is basically just Passbook. There's nothing really special about it. And that's the same for the iPhone 5S as well. I think iOS 11 redesigned the Wallet app some. iOS 10's Wallet app still looked like this, and if you're on a 5S, it looks different, but not by much, because it still only allows you to do passes. The iPhone 6 and later actually allowed you to put cards. So let's go into the Settings app and just see how things look. There's no bold appearance. They actually hadn't redesigned it yet. They did do a few apps in 10, but not a lot, and I'll show you one of them, which will be the Music app. The News app also was, but I have that uninstalled because it doesn't work anymore on iOS 10. You can see here, this is what the Settings app looks like, and there's nothing really too special about it. It's the same kind of list view that we had before. There are some differences, like the control center, obviously, there's no customized controls, which would make sense because this didn't have that control center. It had the older style one, which doesn't look that bad, but still. Now, if we go into some other apps here, you can see that the Find iPhone app and Find Friends, which I think I uninstalled because I don't use it. Yeah, I did. Those were separate apps back then. In fact, those weren't even combined until iOS 13. They still work, but they just are a little different. Now let's go into an app that they actually heavily redesigned in iOS 11, which is the App Store. If we go into here, you can see that the App Store looks a little bit different, and by mean a little bit, I mean a lot. The App Store uses this list view and the carousel view right here. It's not a bad design at all, it just looks different than it used to, and you can see that there's the purchase section here, which is just a list. Another app that was actually Another app that was redesigned in iOS 10 was the Clock app. This app got a full dark mode. They redesigned it completely, and they added a new feature known as Bedtime. Bedtime is basically what modern iPhones have. It's in the Health app now. The rest of these panes are unchanged from iOS 9 and are very similar to modern iPhones. Obviously, this has a dark mode, and this actually added the analog clock. Unfortunately, it did not get the seconds on the timer. That wasn't until iOS 11, but it still had a lot, and honestly, I don't really use the seconds that much. I use them sometimes, but I don't use them a ton. Now, another app that let's experiment with here is, I would do maps, so I'm not going to dox myself. Oh yeah, right, music, because there's actually a feature on here that I actually really enjoy. Now you can see here that there's quite a bit of bold fonts and big fonts. That was an iOS 11 design feature, and iOS 10 got it in a few different places. Like the Music app and the News app, those are both apps that I've seen that utilize that. There might be a few more somewhere that I just don't know of, but these apps look like they utilize it more than any of them, and the Apple Music app looks very similar to how iOS's design language actually looks nowadays. And if I go into, let's just do songs, you can see the icon to download a song, like the little cloud with the down arrow, is actually the exact same icon that we still use today. Unfortunately, it's only contained in the music app, so they didn't actually redesign this fully until iOS 11, which unfortunately this device never got. But yeah, if I were to like play a song here, I can't obviously play the song for you guys, so I'll have to mute the audio from the stream thing here. But so you can see this looks very similar to actually how the modern music app looks. They colorized it a little bit more, and I'm pretty sure the lyric view is not live. There are lyrics though, but they don't actually have timed lyrics, unfortunately. Yeah, there you go. You can see lyrics all are in here, so Apple Music works perfectly fine with this device, which is really cool. And one thing that I really do enjoy is, or it just doesn't do it, that's cool, is the lock screen with the full cover art. Now, iOS 16 is actually planning on bringing this back, but iOS 10 was the last version to actually use this design. And it's unfortunate too, because it looks really good. And there's supposed to be a volume slider there. It's hidden because I'm doing a capture, so it hides it because you can't adjust the volume when you do this. Now let's get into some speed tests here. So if we go into, let's just say settings here, it does take a second. I did close it, so it just takes you back to where you were, but it didn't take that long. And if we go into like at the App Store, like I already showed earlier, you can see that this doesn't take that long. It does take a second or two, but it's not terrible. It's manageable. You can see, there we go, it's already loaded up. If we go and open, let's just say calendar, you can see that was pretty much instant. So if I continue, there we go. Yeah, it's fine if you use my location calendar. Camera. Okay, I don't know what that did, but the camera, you can see how I got this set up. The camera app works perfectly fine, and you can even see, here's my face right here, so hello. But yeah, camera app works perfectly fine. I would demonstrate the cameras on this if it wasn't damaged. You can see the specs on there because it was dropped a while ago, and now there's scratches in the lens that I gotta fix, and I don't want to do that because I barely use this phone. When it comes to third-party app support, it's not terrible. In fact, I can go and try to download an app right now. That I would say is pretty darn common. Now, unfortunately, the YouTube app doesn't work anymore, so that's something else to kind of work around, but the SoundCloud app actually does still work on iOS 10. It is very glitchy though. The version that they killed it off on had a lot of bugs. Spotify does actually work on iOS 10. It's an older version, obviously, but it does still work. But you'll see what I mean here. If I go and try to download Spotify, for instance, it's going to throw an error saying that this is not compatible with this device. It requires iOS 13 nowadays, but I can still download it and it'll still work. Discord actually still works. I'm not going to open it right now, but it actually does still work. It is very, very slow on these phones. Unfortunately, it now requires iOS 11 to actually run the latest version. So if you don't have iOS 11, which this phone has 10, then you'll have to run an older version. I would say there's a very limited amount of time before this app stops working on iOS 10, because on iOS 9, it doesn't work anymore. And 8 and 7, it doesn't work anymore either. It just crashes. You can still sign into it, but it'll still crash because it tries to load stuff that the older apps can't handle, so it just craps itself. Enough with this phone here. How does this phone actually hold up in 2022? Now, honestly, I think the design holds up pretty darn well. The big thing for me is that this device is running iOS 10, and it's pretty darn old at this point. YouTube doesn't work on here anymore. Stuff's starting to just drop support for these older devices. I think at this point, if you have an iPhone 5, you should upgrade. They are really cool phones, and I know you probably will miss yours, but you should upgrade. So yeah, that's about it for this video. If you liked it, then hit the like button and get subscribed if you like the content that you see on this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys all later.